Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Letterboxing with Commentatoring Nerd. And on this Valentine's Day Tuesday night, I get to share with you guys on Letterboxing with Commentary Nerd my In the Mood for Undiscovered Love adventure. Uh, for those of you guys who are not aware, every February, from the beginning of February leading up to Valentine's Day, I've been doing a series called Undiscovered Love. Uh, until this year, I haven't really shared it with anybody other than just like writing reviews and just kind of sharing them on Twitter and things as they go. But this year, I get to put them all together and talk about them in my show. So, um, basically what Undiscovered Love is uh, basically another Real Regrets to Remedy project, but in this case, it's for the romance genre. So it could be rom-coms, rom-drams, anything that's romance adjacent that are glaring blind spots that I really feel like I need to cover. And this year, especially with the Sight and Sound poll really shining a light on In the Mood for Love and some of Wong Kar-wai's other films, I wound up finding three of his movies that I really felt like I needed to get to, and they all had to do with romance. So it seemed perfect for this list. So I gave my Undiscovered Love title a little bit of extra flair, In the Mood for Undiscovered Love. So I hope you guys appreciate that. I had fun playing around with that this year. But let's talk. I watched 14 movies and reviewed them and want to share them with you guys. So let's get to it. All right. So for this list, In the Mood for Undiscovered Love, I covered In the Mood for Love, Chungking Express, and Happy Together. Those are the three Wong Kar-wai movies that I watched. Then we have The African Queen, Sophie's Choice, Blue Valentine, Carol, Long Shot, Vicky Cristina Barcelona, Never Let Me Go, The Fault in Our Stars, To All the Boys I Loved Before, the Love Witch, and Only Lovers Left Alive. All these movies I put on for different reasons. You know, I always try to find a good mix of different kinds of movies, like a little bit of lightheartedness, a little bit heavier. I got some horror adjacent in here. I have some international um, representation, obviously, with Wong Kar-wai movies. And I got some classic Hollywood in here as well with the African Queen. So it's a really good mix of different things within the romantic arena. So let's talk about the first movie that I watched for this. I've been meaning to watch Long Shot for a while since it came out, and I just really hadn't been able to find it in a place where I could have access and see Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron have a really good time together. And basically, what this movie boils down to is it's just a really adorable, hilarious movie. These two together just have really great chemistry. It definitely is an unlikely couple. However, it makes sense when you watch them together within the movie, and that's what's really nice. You know, there certainly it plays with realism because I think maybe some of the things that wind up happening in the story, I don't know if people would have actually made those sacrifices for the other person and whatnot. So, you know, this movie um, maybe uh, takes some suspending of disbelief, but by the time it gets to that point in the movie, you're just along for the ride and you're ready for it to give you any of the good feels that it wants you to have. So I just went along with it and I really enjoyed it. And as a special bonus, Alexander Skarsgård is really funny as a Canadian politician. He's a surprising source for good laughs. There's a lot of good laughs in this movie, but definitely that's one of them. Another really great dynamic, other than Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen, is Seth Rogen and June Diane Raphael. June Diane Raphael plays Charlize Theron's basically, I guess it's campaign manager, and or assistant. I don't know what you want to call her, but basically, she's looking out for Charlize, and basically how her and Seth Rogen butt heads throughout the course of the movie is really interesting. Um, because Charlize Theron is running for uh, uh, trying to set up her campaign for president, and Seth Rogen's writing speeches for her, and it just makes for an interesting recipe, and people don't understand why he's there. He's a little bit off the cut, like a different kind of character, but he winds up being good for her. So I really enjoyed this movie. I give this 4 stars out of 5 and give it a like. All right, the next movie I watched is The African Queen. So we're jumping into classic Hollywood. And basically, this is Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn plays the sister of well, she's a missionary too, but she's a sister of a um, minister, I guess, who set up a mission in Africa, East Africa. It describes it as, but it's a little bit more like Central Africa, like it's a little bit on the edge of Central and East Africa based on where they're talking about they are. That doesn't really matter, but it sort of does. And I care about specifying. But the African Queen, basically, this is basically a river raft adventure with a romance uh, kind of subplot to it. This is like the actual adventure and not suspense, but the thrills that go along with them going along the river is really wonderful. You see a lot of great African wildlife and scenery, and the setting of the boat is just it's really its own character, the African Queen itself. Um, and I really like their chemistry is really good together. Um, the One of the issues with this movie though is the script, the dialogue, the the writing as far as the script, the dialogue goes, is the weak point for me. Just the lines they're given, you know, coming off of Katharine Hepburn movies like The Philadelphia Story and Bringing Up Baby, where the dialogue is just quick-witted and really sharp, and they don't write movies like that anymore. Well, this is an example of a movie where they maybe like could have taken some extra passes on writing some of these lines. One of the things that gets really annoying is they both say each other's names a lot, like every sentence when they're talking to each other, even when they're doing kind of like when they start falling for each other, and especially when they start falling for each other, and they're saying it's kind of like saying sweet nothings to one another. Uh, they just constantly are saying their name added on to whatever they're saying, and it gets just a little annoying. And the lines themselves are also just really kind of like cheesy and uh, not as romantic as I guess whoever wrote them thought they were. Uh, but that's okay. I really love how Rosie kind of like she's all this buttoned up woman at the start of it, but she keeps getting like exhilarated by the experiences she has and basically going on this boat down rapids and things like that. And it's just a really cool movie and how it progresses. So I enjoyed this. I wound up giving it 3.5 stars and a like. So it had room to be better, mainly in the script department. But as far as dialogue lines go, the actual plotting of the movie is really good. It's just the actual dialogue is weak, is the weak point. All right. The next solo movie that I didn't watch in a grouping with something else is Never Let Me Go. This is a movie that I hadn't really heard very much about until fairly recently, and a bunch of people were recommending it as a really good Andrew Garfield movie. But then also, of course, it's got Carey Mulligan and Keira Knightley in it. So I was like, oh shit, why did I not know this was a movie? They kept talking about there being this sci-fi uh, premise that affects the characters in the story, but they did a very good job of not giving anything about the sci-fi premise, and I guess I'll try to do something similar. But basically, Carey Mulligan and her little child actor doppelganger put on a wonderful performance in the movie. Andrew Garfield and Keira Knightley also contribute great performances, but Carey is on another level. I love how she watches or observes people because it's as if you can see right into her mind. Yes, she is also the narrator, but that is not why you feel you know her so well by the end. But goddamn, people really undersold how bleak of a movie this is. It is a soul-crushing journey for these characters to discover how disposable they are in this society. It really is a horrifying existence, even though we spend so much time with them, considering what it is to live and love and the importance of art and creativity, all those things wrapped in together. Plus, these characters are also sabotage each other in ways that are even more unforgivable when you consider the ramifications of like how it affects their lives and what time they have. But in their defense, they don't fully understand the ramifications until it is too late. What beauty there is in this movie is obliterated by the cruel world they live in. So honestly, ultimately, I really did not like this movie very much. Like it was just such too bleak of a world to live in, even though it has really good actors in it and they're giving good performances. I didn't like spending time here. I gave this 3 stars and did not give it a like. The next movie I watched is Sophie's Choice. And you know what? This movie is not really worth watching. The Sophie's Choice of it all is, I guess, the most compelling part, and that's why it's referenced so much. It's definitely a gut-wrenching scene and moment. And I can see why the rest of the movie is not talked about in such detail because it is a giant mess. The majority of the movie focuses on this friendship our narrator forms with a neighbor couple, played by Streep and Klein, which becomes a weird sort of throuple situation without it ever actually becoming a love triangle until near the end of the film. There certainly are a lot of choices characters make in this movie, and I don't really understand any of them. The Kevin Kline character is pretty compelling, yet also terrifying and vile when he flies off the handle. Both our author protagonist and Sophie wind up being the abused lover who keeps letting him back into their lives over and over. At first, it was just Sophie's burden, but Vigo's assistant willingly gets into this odd, clingy, dependent friendship, even after he met Klein's character for the first time at his worst. I feel myself drifting in and out of this movie and losing interest. Then you have Sophie's backstory of being a Holocaust survivor, but her backstory is even more complicated, being non-Jewish. And pause for spoilers in case you don't want to know. I guess a bigger spoiler about her backstory. Just kind of press mute for a second. But her backstory is even more complicated, being non-Jewish and the daughter of a Nazi sympathizer going through this experience. So you also have very weird, mixed up feelings with all her secrets and lies. Some of the things she conceals make absolute sense, but it also detaches you from her story. Her experience was tragic, like everyone else's within the Holocaust, but it is a strangely unique figure to focus on for a Holocaust survivor story. If it isn't clear, I didn't enjoy this much. The 150-minute runtime does not help either. I would say Kevin Kline's acting performance is the part I was most drawn into because of how volatile his character is. The accents or slash broken English of Streep and McNichol are not very good and become grating. It is interesting that this movie is so frequently referenced for the titular Sophie's Choice, considering the rest of the movie around it is, quite frankly, not very good. All right, this was the last movie I watched right before Valentine's Day. Pretty fitting considering it's called Blue Valentine. But this was a movie I've heard a lot about. I also heard about how difficult it is to watch, so did not go into this movie unprepared. However, Blue Valentine is a tough movie to watch, but I think it's very, very good. It's a really interesting way to show the dichotomy of a relationship at its romantic beginning and tumultuous end. The way the movie splices the present storyline with the past storyline is an interesting choice. Unfortunately, while this makes it easier to see the differences between the relationship at different points in time, the uncomfortable nature of the present timeline makes it difficult to have positive feelings for their good moments at the beginning. Um, I felt myself trying to find signs for the behavior that especially Ryan Gosling's character is showing in like the present timeline that came later, more than wondering, well, how did it all start? Um, what I think is brilliant though is that it swings back to me liking the movie more than not. Um, what makes it do that is that they don't fill in the blanks for the period of time in between the two timelines. So it's not like a splicing where you like wind up in the same point in the middle. There's the beginning, there's the end story, and then there's probably like, I don't know, 6 years or so in between that we don't know anything about, except we can pretty much figure out everything out about like kind of what went on through that time and how things got to where they are now. Um, so it's just a really interesting experiment to showcase that Ryan Gosling and Michelle Williams are really great at acting through this, especially because they're playing these characters with they have to play each other like in love with each other and then just like so totally not in love with each other, especially Michelle Williams's character is like she is the one that especially checked out by the end for good reasons, I would say. Um, and it's just really it's really impressive that they're able to do that within one movie. Um, my guess is they shot it so that they didn't have to like be switching back and forth, but it still is really interesting to see them doing that in alternating form as you're watching the movie. So yes, this is not for the faint of heart. With gut-wrenching interactions full of resentment that make your skin crawl, but it is worth your time if you want to see this experiment in telling the rise and fall of a relationship. So Blue Valentine is a well-done movie. I give it 3.5 stars and a like. Okay, so now we're going to get into some of the little subgroupings I had for this In the Mood for Undiscovered Love project. I always like to do this when I have these big projects. Some of you guys who have been around when I did, horror movie makeup and some of the other themed projects where I did little pairings and little marathons for myself to kind of uh, put different things in them to kind of help plan out when I see what and why I see what. And there were just some nice little pairings and trios that went well together. And the first one of those that I watched was the horror adjacent Heartache double feature. So I watched The Love Witch and Only Lovers Left Alive. All right, and let's talk about The Love Witch first. So The Love Witch is a really interesting movie. It was recommended to me by several people um, as this really kind of like, I don't know if cult classic is the right word, but it seems like this like really underrated um, um, witchcraft movie that is also like a erotic thriller sort of throwback. Um, and I just like had to really see what people were talking about. Basically, this is a movie that's made by an actual witch. So I guess a lot of the things in here is based off of real witchcraft, or people who practice witchcraft are some of the things that they do. I don't know about all the love magic and sex magic and stuff that's in this movie, but there's some interesting things for sure. But basically, this movie is a 1960s throwback. This was made in 2016, but it looks like it is right out of the 1960s. It looks like it could be, yeah, a 1960s erotic thriller, like so many, with the colors and the production design and just the yeah, the color grading and the quality of the camera, I guess, is how it is. I don't know enough about how they made the style back then or how it's different from today's aesthetic, but this definitely has an aesthetic that matches much longer ago. It also, on the same token, is trying to be a B movie erotic thriller from the 1960s, and I believe that everything they do in this movie is intentional. However, this movie tries a little bit too hard to be a B movie, and its B movie characteristics is what really loses me, especially the acting. The acting is not very good, or it's not presented very well. Um, really, it's like very wooden lines. It's not that it's over the top. It's not overacting. It's almost just really awkwardly delivered line reads that are, I guess, wooden's the best word for it. But it's just, it's the type of like bad acting line reads that you just have seen lots of examples of, and you like if somebody was to do that, they would just take another take. But there's no other takes in this movie, or at least it feels like they didn't. Um, but basically, this is a story about a woman who practices witchcraft, and she uses her magic to create love potions to seduce these men and, um, yeah, have a good time with them. Unfortunately, she is meddling with magic that is more powerful than she realizes, and she winds up affecting these men in ways that she did not predict, and many of them are in fatal ways. So she winds up being almost like a serial killer witchcraft person, which is a really interesting movie. So I really like all that stuff. It's a really interesting plot line that we follow through it. She is definitely a stunning actress, the person in the lead. Um, and of course, the costuming and the production design is really great. It pops. But yeah, the acting is really hard to get through at times, and that's where I sit on this movie. I give this 3 stars and a like. The stuff that I do like about it does give it me that like um, notification. So, but it is only a 3 star for me. All right. So then the other horror adjacent movie is Only Lovers Left Alive. Only Lovers Left Alive, I've definitely heard a lot about from people that I have to watch it. I've been trying to watch it for a couple years now. I think last year's Undiscovered Love, I considered it, but then I flipped it to being all classic Hollywood era romance movies for classic canoodling canon. Um, but and then I almost did it for horror movie makeup, but then I switched it to being all international horror this year. For those guys who watched it, you guys know. Um, so then I just really had to make sure I put it within the horror adjacent representation for Undiscovered Love this year. So, Only Lovers Left Alive is definitely my kind of movie. I'm glad it was recommended to me so many times. What a vibe Only Lovers Left Alive is. And I am here for every second of it. I I completely understand why everybody has been raving about it for years. Also not very familiar with Jim Jarmusch, so this may have been a first for me viewing one of his films. And I wonder, based on this film, if I'm going to like all his other ones, because I definitely loved like I could definitely feel like there's a style for this guy within this movie, even though I haven't seen his other films. Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston as vampires coming to grips with the eternity of their lives are so wonderful to hang out with in this movie, even when one or both are miserable. I'm always down for a contemplative existential movie, while it also sort of functions as a slice of life movie for them as vampires. I really liked that combination. John Hurt and Mia Wasikowska provide wonderful supporting vampire roles as well. Mia Wasikowska, who's in this scene here too, she is basically stuck as a teenager. She's, I guess, Tilda Swinton's character's sister. Although the way they say sister is it's maybe sort of like vampire sisters, like they were turned at the same time or something like that, that they're not actually related, but they're kind of tied together because of, I don't know their history as vampires. Um, anyway, she causes it a lot of trouble and is a little bit of a extra wrench thrown in, and she's really just a little side adventure in the movie, but it definitely shows, uh, uh, does a good job of illustrating what maybe Tom Hiddleston and Tilda Swinton's lives have been. Kind of like sometimes they're together, sometimes they're not. They're always like in love with each other. They just can't always be with each other, and they definitely can't always be with Mia Wasikowska's character. Um, and there's a lot of time in eternity, and they can't always spend it with the same person. But they have a lot of adventures. It sounds like in the past. But what I love about this movie is the way they share stories and information about the past. Um, they give you enough detail that the audience can glean the stuff that they're talking about. However, they're talking like normal people would when they're referring to things of the past, because they're like, "Oh, you remember not." But that's basically what they don't do, is they don't say, "Remember when you did blah blah blah," and to go into really great detail about things they should be remember. But basically, they just kind of hint at things, and then because they both know the story, they don't really go further into it, and they give us a hint of what's going on, but they don't. They talk about it like they know both each other knows, yeah, the story they're talking about, and I really like how they do that. um, it's a really natural way of them talking about their lives in eternity, and they don't give you the full story, but they shouldn't, because we're just kind of a fly on the wall, observing their life in this moment. So it's really cool that way. um, so I really enjoyed this movie. I give this 4.5 stars out of 5 and give it a like. All right, the next grouping here is YA Yearning. So I had a couple young adult uh, um rom-coms. Actually, no, Vault in Your Stars is not a rom-com, romance movies. And I always like a good alliteration in the title, so here we go. I watched the Netflix movie that's become a whole franchise, apparently, To All the Boys I've Loved Before. I've just never gotten around to it. Obviously, this isn't necessarily something I gravitate towards to all the time. Every once in a while, I'll dabble, but it's certainly not going to be. I'm not certainly not going to be the one who checks this out first day it's available on Netflix. But I've heard good things about it, um, and I just wanted to check it out for this list. So, To All the Boys I Loved Before, um, is I really had a fun time with this movie. I'm really a sucker for coming of age rom-coms and rom-droms. It might sound weird to be a mark for that, but I suppose they speak to the internal struggles adolescents go through growing up, which intrigued me enough to go into counseling. So I was always really interested in that stuff, kind of like as I was going through school, or kind of like even growing up too, just like kind of what children and adolescents kind of and how they grow, how they think, why they do what they do, and whatever. So I guess something about it is intriguing, often hopeful for the future, and honestly just stinking cute. So back to the premise of the movie. To All the Boys I've Loved Before is utterly adorable. Lana Condor is an amazing young star, and I completely understand how this movie franchise took off with her in the lead. I suppose the arrangement that her and Peter come up with is a little too emotional blackmail-y and is filled with predictable tropes, but I kind of love their fake romance and how it becomes a real one. I also like her soul searching about her relationship with her big sister and her best friend. And last, but certainly not least, little Kitty is an amazing little sister who maybe practices too much tough love, but her brutal honesty is much needed to call out her teen bullshit, her sister's teen bullshit. Um, I so the premise is really funny because she growing up she always wrote love notes to the people she had crushes on, but she never sent them. It's almost like just her own version of writing diary entries. She even postmarked them and everything and had addresses. So at the beginning of the movie, they all actually get sent to those people, and that's kind of how we kind of get the movie running. And then she winds up doing a fake romance with one of them, who she shares kind of the whole gist to, and but he also needs help in his own love life, and they have a mutual interest that they decide to engage in a fake romance. But of course, you know how rom-coms go. You know, fake romances oftentimes become real ones, and of course, this movie does have a little bit of formulaicness and clichéness to it, but it's still a really adorable movie. Uh, even with all those kind of familiar ideas. Um, yeah, so To All the Boys is a solid YA movie. Nothing super exceptional, but like many, for me, was heartwarming enough and cute. I'm not sure if I'll watch the sequels, but I like this one enough. I just might find the time one day. So I give this 3.5 stars and a like. I did enjoy it. All right. And this is the most glaring one. One of the most glaring ones of this whole list is The Fault in Our Stars. I It's possible that I've watched bits and pieces of this before, but never watched the whole movie all the way through. I had heard things about it and kind of knew some of was spoiled on a few of the elements, but I just still wanted to check this out for myself. I've been trying to get to it for a long time, and I finally got to it. And wow, what a great movie! I've always been a Shailene Woodley fan, despite not having seen perhaps her most well-known movie, which is this one. She isn't going to play a huge variety of characters, but what she does so well in dramatic acting and delivering on emotion of a scene is definitely in this movie. She's really good at that, whether it's Big Little Lies or anything else. She's just a great dramatic actress. Um, Yes, some of that is her expert ability to cry in scenes, but it is way more than that. It's how she speaks, how she listens, and carries herself in scenes with her acting partner. Her chemistry here with Elgort is infectious. The way they lift each other up and give each other their own little infinity is beautiful. Um, Elgort's Elgort's troubles aside, I can't get over how charismatic he is in this and Baby Driver, yet he has barely any charisma or chemistry in West Side Story, and mainly only provides his dancing ability in that movie. It's just really strange. I'm sure much of the lines so in this movie, I'm sure much of the lines to each other are from the source material this is adapted from, but regardless, the writing is brilliant. Yes, a lot of it is about death, dying, and what and who we leave behind, legacy, fears, and oblivion, but I think it is even more important the random little conversations they have, embracing the time they have with each other. And the eulogies absolutely decimate me. But honestly, it is so damn beautiful and hopeful and thankful that you can only be but so sad, despite the reality of these are young people suffering through cancer and loss of friends and loved ones. Best of all, you really feel how full their love is. The Fault in Our Stars has been praised for years, and silly me put off getting misty-eyed and body tingles and goosebumps for how emotionally rich it is. Hazel Grace, played by Woodley, and August Waters, played by Elgort, are one of the best romantic duos I can remember seeing in a movie. This definitely claims a spot amongst my favorite movies. I give this 4.5 stars and a like. All right, the next list is the next grouping is what's in a name. So I had a couple of movies that was just, women's names, and I've done a list before that was what's in a name themed. And these ones were not on them yet because I hadn't seen them yet. But maybe I would add one or two of these to those rankings. I'm not sure. But I watched Carol and Vicky Cristina Barcelona for this grouping. All right, so I'm first going to talk about Carol, amazing scrutinized romance set in the 1950s with Rooney Mara and Kate Blanchett playing off of each other with flawless chemistry. Both are too good at acting. It is unfair, but something I'll gladly enjoy. But my biggest takeaway from Carol, and really it's a takeaway from romance movies in general that do it really well, and The Fault in Our Stars did it really well between Woodley and Elgort. But then here again with Mara and Blanchett. But basically, what is particularly special in a romance movie is when the actors or the director pulling out of the actors are able to capture all the subtleties of how people in love look at each other. It's not just how they stare into each other's eyes, but also how they try to steal little glances when they think the other isn't looking, or better yet, when one admires the other from across the room and waits for them to catch their eye. I don't know how well the production sells the time period, but their relationship and people's opinions of Carol for her dalliances are certainly taboo. This is the other well done aspect of Carol because of everything that is at stake while they are having this love affair. Also, the way Carol's husband, who she's trying to divorce, says Abby's name is loaded with all the judgment and contempt. What is difficult about this movie is that there is a young child caught in the middle of this divorce, and Carol's relationship with Therese has consequences on that more so. Not a fault to them, but how her ex-husband and much of society sees them as lesbian lovers. So um, just like how they look at each other and how the outside world looks at them is definitely, you know, a big focus of this movie and things that I appreciated. There were lots of moments where Carol reminded me of Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I would say the filmmaking didn't fully trust enough in holding on these two leading ladies because they used a lot of editing tricks, lens flares, glaring through windows that concealed some of their interactions. Regardless, I really enjoyed Rooney Mara and Kate Blanchett taking me on their journey with them. I give this 4 stars out of 5 and give it a like. All right, now let's talk about Vicky Cristina Barcelona. Vicky Cristina Barcelona is quite frankly, and I can't believe I'm using that phrase after watching this movie and what it does to Rebecca Hall's character. But quite frankly, this is a bad movie. So let me lean even more into the terrible lines they gave brilliant actress Rebecca Hall by letting me be frank to further underscore that the writing of the dialogue is horrendous. Let me be frank again by saying people don't talk like this. I wanted to shout at the screen that so many times. And even if I was to get over that, this movie is constantly being narrated in the most asinine, tell not show way imaginable, frankly. How can a movie with ScarJo, Rebecca Hall, Penelope Cruz, and Javier Bardem be this bad? But thank God Penelope Cruz does enter the movie over halfway in, because she gives some sort of life to this train wreck. The only good section of the movie is the throuple between Bardem, Cruz, and Johansson, if I'm being completely frank, because they actually explored some interesting relationship dynamics of how the three balanced each other and allowed them all to coexist and be romantic together. I don't even need to have been drinking, to be frank, and say I would have turned this movie off 10 minutes in if it weren't for some sixth sense of completionism for this project. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn about Vicky Cristina, Marilena, Juan Antonio, or Barcelona. I give this 2 stars and no like. And for the grand finale, we have my weekend of Wong Kar-wai. Yeah, I decided to save them all for the last weekend of this project and watch 3 of them over 2 days. I watched Chungking Express and Happy Together uh, back to back on the same day, and then I saved In the Mood for Love for the following day on Sunday and Super Bowl Sunday. And wonderful weekend seeing movies from one of the most appreciated directors there is. Like, In the Mood for Love, it may crack the top 10 of the Sight and Sound poll, best of all time, and that's really what encouraged me to watch that one and the rest of these. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Chungking Express first. So I loved going in relatively blind to all these movies, even though these are lauded over. People tend to be really great about not giving away all that makes them special in their praises. Chungking Express was sort of a disorienting, confusing experience at first because of this, as it winds up being basically a 2-part anthology with 2 barely related tales or people of people playing romantic games. I love how this movie winds up being about a sense of serendipity of how things will work out or coincidences will arise in mysterious ways, yet also how people can miss out on opportunities of happiness because of the games we often play when we're interested in someone. The first part focuses on a man whining about how he can't reach the woman he broke up with, in quotes, as the worst April Fool's joke of all time, and how clever he thinks he is in buying cans of pineapples that match his birthday. Yeah, this is the weirdest part of the movie that I don't connect with, is his character. Um, but he crosses paths with a striking figure of the woman in a blonde wig with sunglasses, who runs a drug smuggling scheme that goes wrong. That is the aspect of part one that really catches my interest, the distinct stylistic choices, and also the distinct stylistic choices of motion blurring, slow motion, and other editing tricks that I think this movie is famous for live predominantly in the first section of this movie. The second part of the film is the section I truly love. Leung and Faye Wong are absolutely mesmerizing in their own rights. I love how playful the character of Faye is, yet still flirtatious in playing hard to get. Or at least that is what she thinks she is doing. Her bit with his apartment is such a cool montage, and she's adorable in her commitment to the bit. Although she may have taken the bit too far, which I also love. Love for dancing and loud music is also infectious. Tony Leung is dripping with charisma in this, as really he does in each of these films in different ways, but he also has a playfulness in how he talks to the items in his apartment that belong to his ex, or simply just his bar of soap. It's funny how he talks to inanimate objects in this movie. Because of how he talks to these items, I would have thought he'd catch on to what was going on because of this, but he is also blissfully oblivious, and in his own world, it seems, that makes him not notice things. Another special element that runs through this whole movie and is my favorite thematic element is the use of reoccurring diegetic music. It is used to underscore the coincidences of how these human connections cross paths, but is also used to connect scene to scene as passage of time occurs. Initially, you were like, why does this person keep playing the same song? What is this, Mos Eisley Cantina or something? Because it feels like they keep playing it in the same passage of time. But in actuality, we are seeing meeting after meeting after meeting over several days, multiple weeks, at least in the case of part two. In part one, the music is more about showing overlapping perspectives of how events intersect. Um, if it wasn't for the annoying male lead in part one, I would have loved this movie even more. At the end at the end of the day, I love all the tricks Wong Kar-wai is using that does make this a whole that goes together, even if it really doesn't seem to quite mesh at first. Chungking Express is just a cool movie as a wonderful experiment in storytelling and filmmaking. All right, so now let's talk about Happy Together. This is a story about two men who decide to try to fix their relationship and start over once again by taking a trip to Argentina or sort of moving there, I guess, um, and trying to start over and find new beginnings and make things work out. But of course, the problems of their relationship and their on again, off again relationship continue in Argentina. Happy Together is definitely a title that does not prepare you for the sad yet still hauntingly beautiful film that unfolds before you. This has none of the flair of Chungking Express. Well, sort of. It has its own sense of self, though. The use of slow motion or adjusting frame rate, I think that's the right terminology here. I'm still not an expert on some of the editing tricks that they use in these movies. But basically, what he uses as editing tricks are the element that connects his movies. But this one uses it way, way more. There isn't a lot of the motion blurring or other flashier tricks, however. This movie also plays with coloring to separate different time periods using black and white aesthetic, like in this scene here, in sections where characters are reflecting on the past. Narration was important in Chungking, but it feels even more important in this film because we actually get narration mainly from Tony Leung's character, but there's two other characters we get narration from too, and it's really important when we do. All this together makes for a movie that really wants you to sit in every moment of longing, loneliness, and feeling lost that these characters go through. Argentina was supposed to be a romantic getaway for a chance to start over and break the relationship patterns of the past, but alas, being happy together is always just out of reach. Tony Leung is impressive again in this movie as our main. He doesn't have nearly as much charisma as he does in other things, and definitely seems to be a broken person who is adrift. Even more so, Leslie Chung embodies this wild spirit that is tough to pin down, yet is coursing with extreme emotions, seeking out lust and love and luxury. Plus, he has great style. His yellow jacket is almost a character all its own. Chang Chen as Chang is the third member that comes in later into the film instead of the main on again, off again couple and is somewhat underserved in the story. However, I think he was able to provide a really poetic element that wouldn't have worked as well if we only ever focused on the main two leads. I love how the whole movie they are vague with the passage of time, but use title cards very specifically to highlight it in the end of the movie. How all three of these men wound up trying to find each other, yet sadly, they were all in the wrong places. Happy Together ultimately dragged for me too much. I appreciate what the movie was going for in its slowness, but I found myself not fully engaged. The poignant ending really elevated the movie overall for me and how it tied the themes of the movie together. Uh, this is my least favorite of these Wong Kar-wai three, but still very good in its own right. I give this 3.5 stars and a like. And now for the titular In the Mood for Love, or at least in the mood for undiscovered love. But In the Mood for Love is considered to be Wong Kar-wai's greatest achievement and sits in the Sight and Sound top 10. I was beginning to worry that this movie couldn't live up to the expectations I was building up in my brain for the aesthetic so many people gush over and the beauty of the storytelling. I'm elated to say that In the Mood for Love absolutely rises to those expectations and more. The style of this movie is the first thing we must talk about. Wong Kar-wai had already uh, showed me some special cinematography and editing tricks in the other two movies I watched in my weekend of Wong Kar-wai, but this one seems like the realization of all his powers. As a side note, I think I need to indulge myself in some more 60s movies because the homages he pays to the style of films from the decade in this film and the way Love Witch evokes the same time period really caught my eye. When I was imagining the expert cinematography people alluded to, I was picturing something a bit different and showier. Now, um, not that this movie is not showy in its own way, but the colors are distinct but also sort of muted. It is mainly through the lighting of scenes that the colors come to life and the actors' expressions are illuminated. I rarely pay attention to lighting unless it is really obvious when I think of cinematography, which honestly is a mistake on my part. But it also has become somewhat of a lost art in filmmaking because of digital era and other development in filmmaking. The lighting of this movie is perfection. Considering the cinematography, we also must discuss the production design, costuming, and hairstyling it's highlighting. You know from watching this movie how meticulously Wong Kar-wai crafts every scene, sequence, transition, editing choice, camera angle, pattern of wallpaper or drapes, and recurring music cues. It is crucial for his editing tricks to work for telling the passage of time. In previous movies, he does this too, In previous movies, he does this too of having details between scenes being the way a transition is stitched together and to depict passage of time. Whether it's the carpeting, floor tile, music playing, or the same street corner shot from different angles, everything fits together seamlessly. And we are not even yet talking about the emotionally scintillating progression of Mr. Chow and Mrs. Chang's relationship. They are neighbors, friends, the victims of betrayal that hit way too close to home, and perhaps even lovers themselves. Tony Leung and Maggie Chung are an achingly enticing duo to watch. I love the way Mrs. Chang's uniqueness pops on screen thanks to her gorgeous fancy dresses and hairstyle that evokes a classic Hollywood actress. I love how Mr. Chow is so stoic, yet also can melt your heart with quiet charm. The fate of their relationship, however you want to characterize it as, is also tragic in many ways too. It is odd because they wind up being treated like their respective husband and wife, who are actually engaging in the things people are gossiping about for them. But their partners are safely in remote spaces away from home, where they can kind of escape the gossip and rumors. The neighbor and suspicion, really. The neighbor dynamic is such a cool element that drives so much of this story and relationship. I could probably dissect every scene and frame of this movie, but really all there is to say is that In the Mood for Love is an exceptional masterpiece. One of the most brilliantly shot movies I have ever seen, with equally brilliant production design and acting as the camera's subjects. This being touted as one of the best movies of all time makes a lot of sense now that I've seen the mastery for myself. I gave this 5 stars out of 5 and gave it a like. All right, so now that we got to the end of the list, we can talk about what my favorites were of the list, which you guys kind of got some of the idea from it as I was rating them as we go. But here is my actual ranking of the 14 movies I watched. Number 1 is In the Mood for Love. Number 2, Only Lovers Left Alive. Number 3, The Fault in Our Stars. These are definitely my 3 favorite movies from the list. Then we have kind of splitting hairs between 4 through 6. They're all 4-star movies that I liked. Is Carol, Chungking Express, and then Long Shot. Then we have the 3.5-star movie and alike, To All the Boys I Loved Before, The African Queen, Happy Together, and Blue Valentine. I liked them in that order. And then we have The Love Witch at 3 stars, but still like at 11. And number 12, Never Let Me Go, 3 stars, no like. Sophie's Choice, 2.5 stars and no like. And then Vicky Cristina Barcelona with 2 stars and no like. The only reason it gets 2 stars is because Penelope Cruz is actually pretty awesome in this movie, and she definitely rescues it. So that covers my In the Mood for Undiscovered Love series. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about the movies that I watched leading up to Valentine's Day, and you get to hear about them on Valentine's Day, or at least this show comes out on it. We'll see if you guys actually watch it on Valentine's Day, but I thought it would be kind of nice to have this episode come out with all the love-themed stuff on Valentine's Day. So I hope you guys liked all the movies I talked about and what I had to say about them. And if you haven't seen some of these, hopefully you check them out. If you have seen them, I hope you agreed with me or liked my takes, those sorts of things. So anyway, as you guys might have noticed, as far as letterboxing with Commentatoring Nerd goes, I think I'm sort of going to be moving to a less regular format like this, where I bunch uh like do kind of like longer projects, and then I come back at the end of them and do kind of a recap video instead of doing a week by week video like I had done through the back half of the last year. Um, you know, it's just too much work to keep up with on a week to week basis. And honestly, I feel like the stuff that I have the most fun making videos about and talking to you about is doing these like reviews of the big projects at the end, the horror movie makeups, the undiscovered loves. In the next couple weeks, I'm going to be binging Blind Spots and Black Cinema, and doing all the other different kind of Real Regrets to Remedy projects that I go through. And I want to be able to share those with you guys, but I don't need to share with you them on a weekly basis and try to like stress myself about watching things by a certain point so I can make the video, and then I just have to watch them all and then make one video. That's a much better process. And then, yeah. And then hopefully the way the videos work for you guys works better too, so it's not so much stuff stuffed into episodes in one, and it's a little bit more streamlined by the time I get to the end of it. So that's how letterboxing with Commentary Nerd is going to look. I hope you enjoyed at least this entry of it, and I hope to see you guys next time at the end of February when I get to talk about my binging Blind Spots in Black Cinema.